Hey guys, join me in Psalm chapter 25. Psalm 25, we're starting a brand new sermon series today called Renewal. And here's the idea behind this whole sermon series, tell you how it kind of came up. I think as Christians, we have a desire, a genuine desire to grow in Christ, to do what God's wanting us to do, serve Jesus, but sometimes life hits us really, really hard. Right? And it leaves us drained because we fall into a lot of different categories. We look at our lives and we're tired. You know, we're either way too busy or we're way too bored. We're wrestling with guilt or happiness. We feel trapped. We feel helpless. We feel disconnected. We should be thriving in our walk with Jesus, but we're still trapped in sin instead of living in victory. And it feels like we can never actually break out of that cycle. You know, all these cycles that we're just going through. So we kind of accept, well, this is life now. This is what life's going to be like for me. It's going to be how it's going to work. I'm done. And we just get to the point where we're constantly drained. All the stuff, right? Whether it's all internal or whether it's external coming at us, it leaves us in this place where we feel drained, empty, purposeless, hopeless, and so what we really need is a little bit of renewal, right? We need to get kind of get unclogged a little bit, you know, feel like we're new again. And there's a reason why we feel this way. God is all about developing and deepening us. That's what he's about doing. That's why God does not show up and rescue us every single time we fall down and we scrape our spiritual or emotional elbows. You know what I mean? That's why he's not there every single time we get hurt. Because the plan is not to give us a quick fix. The plan is to develop us, deepen us, and grow us, which is why we need to learn to sit at his feet and not just come for the Band-Aid so we can get back to our lives, right? We need renewal. We need to be made whole again. And that's kind of what spawned this series, because a lot of times in the last several months, basically, I've been counseling a lot of different people, and I'm seeing a lot of the same kind of themes come up, right? Some of the same concepts, some of the same struggles, some of the same all this stuff. And it made me stop and go, okay, God, we need to address this on a wider scale, because I don't know if you guys have counted lately, but there is only one of me, okay? And you're like, Joey, you do therapy? No, I do situational discipleship. Okay, there's a difference because what I like to do is take people and connect them with Jesus. He is the great counselor, right? The wonderful one. So, help you connect with him. But on this level, we've got to come to a point where we can see what's going on in our lives and see how it is draining our spirit, see how it's draining us physically, emotionally, mentally, or whatever, and learn to take that to Jesus for a full-on renewal, not just a Band-Aid. Correct? You got me? So this morning we're going to start, and over the next 6 weeks, we're going to be looking at different topics of things that just drain us and learn how to go to Christ and find our renewal, right? So this morning we're going to start in Psalm 25 with something horrible. Something that every single one of us experience in different seasons of life. Something that our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, calls an epidemic in our country, worldwide. An epidemic. He says it is a public problem and it should be addressed and taken absolutely seriously. That topic is loneliness. Loneliness. I mean, think about this for a second. If I say the word loneliness, which I just did several times, what comes to your mind? I mean, what hits your brain the second I said that? I don't know, I always think when I'm thinking of a lonely person, I get like this commercial in my head or something where you got this older guy and he's kind of sitting by the window and maybe it's raining. He's just all sad and depressed, right? I mean, but think about it. We understand loneliness because we have all been there, right? We've all been lonely at some point in our lives, and we're all going to go through seasons where we feel that we're all alone. We're going to go through seasons where we feel abandoned. We're going to go through seasons where we're just upset we didn't get invited to the party, right? So you might say, so what's the big deal then? We go into loneliness, we come out of loneliness. Why is this such an epidemic? I mean, why is the Surgeon General telling us this is a problem? Because loneliness is way deeper than we think. Loneliness has been linked clinically. It can contribute to, if not cause, depression, anxiety, heart disease, dementia. So, I mean, even clinically speaking, you may or may not be depressed and struggle with anxiety. You may just be lonely. The list goes on. It goes to high blood pressure, heart disease, memory issues because of loneliness, addictions in every field just because we're trying to fill a void that's in here, so we reach out to everything around us, self-harm, self-deletion. These things begin to happen because of loneliness. Now you're thinking, how can loneliness do all that? Right? I mean, just go get some friends, man. It's not that simple. Because at its core, loneliness is not just you're sitting at home on Friday night without a date. Loneliness is detachment. Loneliness is disconnection. That's what it is. Now in Psalm 25, you go to Psalm 25, this is a lament of David. Okay, David is in a place, and we don't exactly know what time of David's life this is happening. He's talking about hiding from people who want to kill him, which happened multiple times to David. Okay, I tend to think it's more toward the end of his life, maybe toward the time when Absalom, his son, was trying to take the kingdom. That's my thought. There are people who will disagree with me. They may be right. I may be right. One day we'll ask David. Okay, maybe he was, I don't know, waiting for the bathroom. I don't know what's going on. Okay, but he's feeling this way. And as David is sitting out here, contemplating his life, contemplating that people are trying to kill him, contemplating that he is away from everything, he cries out in verse 16, "Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted." David cries out here, "I am lonely." Now you may be, bless you, you may be sitting here thinking, whoa, David, you got people trying to kill you. Your son may be trying to take the kingdom away. All these things are happening, and you're worried about being lonely? Don't you got some bigger issues to deal with? But look at where David is. David is in a place here where he feels that he is separated from God. He feels that he is a king, but he's hiding in a cave. He feels that he is not with the camp of Israel anymore. He's outside of it. And so all of these symptoms around him lead him to cry out to God, "God, I am lonely. God, I am afflicted." Some of your translations even use the word desolate. "God, I am desolate in this place." And you get the idea of a dry wasteland with no water, no shelter, no anything. And David goes, "God, that is where I am right now. Even though there are people around me, they just want to kill me. Even though I know you have a plan for me. Even though I know who I am, God, this is where I am." You ever been there? You see, loneliness is a lot deeper than we think. The clinical definition is that loneliness is a separation anxiety. That is what loneliness is. Clinically speaking, it's the distress we feel when our social connections do not meet our need for emotional intimacy. In other words, all this stuff's happening around you, but it ain't connected, man. It's not getting inside of who we are. It's not meeting our needs. It's not connected. We still feel on the outside. And this comes from our need to connect. Loneliness is a spiritual problem. It's a symptom of something going on that's much, much deeper. We were created to connect. We were created to be in fellowship. We are created in the image of a God who literally exists in relationship. 3 in 1, the Trinity, right? So are we. We are body, soul, spirit. And we need to learn how to connect with people on every one of those levels. This is what we were made to do. It's a connection. We have a desire in our heart, at the deepest core that we are, to be seen, to be heard, to be noticed, to be loved, to be understood, to be valued, to know that we mattered, to be with people in such a way that they're feeding us and we're feeding them. This is why it's not enough to just get more friends. That won't solve your loneliness issue. We try, though. We try to get more followers on Facebook or social media. We try to do everything on the planet. We try to create a new identity for ourselves because the old one wasn't working. So we start running after all of these things because at its heart, what's happening as we feel loneliness, we are disconnected. We're hardwired to desire relationship. We're hardwired to want to connect with God, to be connected and whole inside, to connect with other people. And when that connection isn't happening, when we're suffering a disconnect, whether that be by loss, whether that be through abuse, our hurts, our own insecurities and imagination. In other words, I went there, nobody talked to me. Well, was that really about you, or are you just kind of going on? You know what I'm saying? Those types of things. We find ourselves wrestling to feel that connection because we miss it. We long for it. Now, you may be sitting there, Joey, nope, I don't need nobody. I don't need people. Look at all the cats I have. Yeah, this is great. I don't need people. I love animals more than I love humans. Well, let me tell you what C.S. Lewis says about you. Okay. He makes the comment in the book, The Four Loves, he says, since we are created, right, we are created to need one another, and he quotes God saying it's not good that man should be alone. He says the absence and the failure of this need to appear, in other words, the illusionary feeling that it's good that we're alone, is a bad spiritual symptom, just as a lack of appetite is a bad medical symptom, because men do really need food. In other words, if you said, well, I have no appetite, I'm never hungry, we would think there is something wrong with you, because we do need to eat. I mean, that's a symptom of so many things that are wrong. C.S. Lewis is arguing, you know what, you feel that loneliness and you don't feel it, you're like, nah, I don't need people. That's the same thing to your spirit as not needing food is to your appetite. You do need people, you've just ceased to feel it. And that's even more dangerous, because that's where the disconnect takes us. It takes us into isolationism. It takes us into a place where no matter what's causing it, even if it is just in our imagination, the feeling of detachment is real. And it shows up in things like this. We feel like we don't fit in. Even when we go places, we just don't fit, man. Nobody's like me here. Nobody understands us. This is where grief hits. Grief hits us in this point. Nobody understands what I'm going through. I'm all alone in this thing. There's nobody who can help me. So we feel lonely. Guilt and shame. We get guilty, man. We feel, the Bible says the guilty flee when nobody pursues, which is why I don't jog. But it happens. You ever get around people and you don't want to show who you are because they may find out? We're afraid they're going to discover. We're afraid they're going to realize something, so we kind of hide, and we're still lonely in the crowd. A lack of security. I mean, we don't feel safe. We don't feel safe to open up. Someone hurt us in the past, and we just kind of don't want that. We'd rather deal with the loneliness than deal with the risk of the pain of rejection yet again. We feel unloved. We feel unseen, so we wonder, what's the point? Why would I even try to get around anybody? Nobody's going to like me, and we feel like it's always going to be this way. These are the symptoms of loneliness. We feel like nothing's ever going to change. Nothing's ever going to be different. We're lonely in our marriages. We're lonely at our workplaces. We're lonely on social media. We're lonely at church. We're lonely everywhere we go. How do we break out of this cycle? I mean, how do we make this right? Because if we do not learn how to reconnect and let God renew us from our loneliness, we're going to find ourselves either completely isolating from people, or we're going to start chasing everything under the rainbow to try to fill the void. And it's usually going to be stuff that's only going to make us more lonely. So how do we break this cycle? What can we learn from loneliness? Because I don't want you to sit here and think that all loneliness is necessarily bad. Like I said, we're all going to go through seasons where we feel isolated. We're all going to go through seasons where we feel like nobody can connect with us, but we're not created to be incomplete. We want to approach God in a wholeness, and that wholeness always means that we must connect with God, ourselves, and others. We always must. We're supposed to live in this completion this way, and anything that attacks and separates that completion will cause loneliness. So loneliness is actually, I want us to think about loneliness this morning as a warning light. You know those things on your dashboard when they pop up and they're like, hey, there's a problem here? And you got a choice in this moment. You can either deal with it or you can cover it with electrical tape. We want to see loneliness this morning as a warning light. What's it warning me about? What's it telling me? And how do I make this right? So the answer to loneliness is not just more friends. It's not just become an extrovert. It's not any of that kind of stuff. The answer to loneliness is to learn to reconnect. To reconnect with God, reconnect with what's going on in here, and reconnect with people around us. That's where the disconnect happened. We've got to reconnect. Okay, and these are going to be, this morning we're going to talk about the steps to reconnect, the steps to reconnect. And I want to challenge you to go through every single one of these so that we can see how David worked, we're going to see how it works in our lives, and make sure that we are connecting, because we are not connecting with God and ourselves. We're not going to connect with other people. If we're not connecting in here, we're not going to connect with other people. I mean, if I don't like being in my own skin, how am I going to like being around you? You know what I mean? We've got to make sure we're here. And then when we are right with God, we're right with ourselves, we're going to find it a whole lot easier to feel connected with other people too. And that's the goal. That's victory. Let's learn to reconnect. So we're going to roll back through the latter part of what David says here, verses 16 to 18, and we'll jump in verse 22 as well. But we're going to see how David approached this concept of his feeling of loneliness and how we can apply that too, okay, as we look at these steps to reconnect. Step number one, when you're lonely, call out to God. Call out to God. You say, Joey, that seems really simplistic. Some of the best things in life are simple. You ever had ice cream? Okay, let's go to verse 16. David cries out here. He says, turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. David remembers the fellowship he's had with God. David remembers the times that he fought Goliath, that he wrestled the lion and the bear and all these things. And he remembers all these times where he's played the harp and he's sat in the fellowship of the company of Christ. He remembers the times that he has sinned. This is all of chapter 25, by the way. I'm just kind of highlighting it here. As we're reading through, he's recalling his sinfulness and how God has been merciful to him in those days. This is what I mean. Guys, when we are lonely, I promise you, I can guarantee you, in some regard, you are drifting away from God. In some regard, there is a disconnect. And what David is doing here is he's in the first 15 verses of this psalm, he's been recounting, God, this is who you are. God, this is what you do. This is you, God. Now turn to me. Turn to me. He's crying out, God, look again and see me. We got to connect. God, I've walked away. God, I'm here in a desolate place. God, I've got to see you again to get my bearings straight. I've got to get back to you. Guys, we've got to call out for the comfort and the fellowship of God first. Now, as we get ready to do this, how do we do it? I mean, I can easily say call out to God. Here's how. Examine your own relationship with God for a second. You know? Examine your relationship with God when you're feeling this loneliness. Stop for a second and look, okay, God, how am I connecting with you? Let me ask you this, right now in your life, how are you connecting with God? I don't mean, well, I come to church once a week, Joey. How would your marriage work if you only saw your wife for about an hour a week? You know, I only saw your husband for about an hour a week. Kids, hour a week's good, guys. And we're going to spend about 30 minutes of that singing a song together, and then we're all going to sit quietly and listen to something, and then we're going to go. How would that work? Let me ask you guys this, how are you connecting with God in a way that's down here? In a way that is voicing out to him, in a way that you're actually following him? How are you doing that? Maybe you're reading the Bible, that's awesome. A lot of people always, they're asking me, hey Joey, what are some devotionals you'd recommend? The Bible. I mean, I don't have a problem with devotionals, but guys, don't let that replace what you're reading in the scripture. Well, Joey, what about this one? It talks about some really good stuff. You know what? John's really good too. You know, Paul, he wrote some really good devotionals. You get me? Let's get in the Word. Let's spend that time in prayer with God. And again, we've already talked about this in the last couple of weeks, but guys, the idea of prayer, sometimes we can't always sit down for an hour in the morning and pray or whatever. That's fine. Pray as you can. Pray during the day. Make conversation with God. You know, just kind of have that moment where it's like, okay, God, what am I going to get today? Let's look at the menu here. God, talk with God about that stuff. Say, Joey, that's crazy. I know, but it's great. Because we bring God into our everyday life. A large reason we're not connecting with God is because we disconnect him from our lives because we want him in the box we reach for when we're in a jam. Guys, this is about inviting him in. What are you doing to further your relationship with God? Are you going deeper? Are you trying to work out who he is? And when you start looking at how your relationship with God is going right now, it helps us to see where we have gotten off a little bit. You know, where we've gotten off a little bit. Have we gotten too busy, too lazy to have a relationship with God? Are we settling for entertainment and over connection? This hurts us in every area of life, by the way. We settle for entertainment. We'd rather, even in a company of people, we'd rather sit and quietly scroll, you know? We would rather sit and numb ourselves with video games than actually try to connect with other people. It really, 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 really made me mad a few years ago when they switched Halo to only be a one-player game. You know why? Because me and my son, man, we'd play video games together, we'd do this, and suddenly they switched it because they're wanting to build the online community. And I'm sitting here so I can play with a dude in Japan, but not someone right across the living room from me. How does this work? So I boycotted certain things, you know. They had no relevance to that, but I boycotted them anyway. Did something hurt us? And we're walking away from God. We're hiding from God. You will never get close to God as long as you keep trying to hide. We've got to bring it back. How? By worshiping. If we're going to call out to God, let's do that. Let's worship. Go back through Psalm 25 here. He says, verse 4, make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day. Remember your mercy and your steadfast love. They've been from of old. Remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions according to your steadfast love. Remember me, oh, for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. He's crying out to God. Guys, if we're going to call out to Jesus, once we've examined that relationship, worship him. And I don't mean just turn on some music in the background. I mean reflect on his goodness. Reflect on his relationship with you. Reflect on who he is, what he has done for you. Build that stuff back. Now, yeah, we can connect with God in a very intimate way when we sing. We can. Guys, when we're here to worship on Sunday morning and we're singing these songs, hopefully as we're singing a song, Teach Me to Abide, your brain is going back to a time you did abide this week. Your brain may be going to the fact that you didn't. And it's a fresh cry out to God, bring me in, you know? But we connect with God through our singing, yeah. But we connect with God in a whole other way through our tears. When we simply go and we cry out with David, turn to me and be gracious to me, for I'm lonely, I'm afflicted. Now we're ready to renew. Renew it. Call out to God, examine your life, worship him, and seek that renewal. The Hebrew term for gracious there, be gracious to me, is a term that was used oftentimes with regard to orphans as you're giving to them and calling them and kind of taking care of them. It's also same word was used for reconciling with enemies and bringing them back in too and serving them. And what he's crying out for here is, God, restore to me the benefits of the relationship. Restore to me the benefits of who we were, what we did. Call out. Because sometimes, guys, I'll give you this warning. Sometimes when we're going back to God and we've been gone for a while, what we want is the old relationship back. That may not be what God's wanting to give us. He may be wanting to give us what is new. It's not about picking up where we left off. It's about picking up what he is doing now. The new scars we have. The new trials we have faced. Because remember, he's here to develop and deepen you. And sometimes that loneliness, what we find out is we're not lonely for people, we're lonely for God. We want him again. We want him again. I know early on in my ministry, I had gotten to a point where I was doing collegiate ministry. I was pastoring a small church, doing it bivocationally, but both ministry. And man, I was running. Yeah, I was going like I do now, kind of. But anyways, this was then. And one night I just pulled up after our worship at the campus, and I pulled into the house, and man, I hadn't seen, there wasn't a Christina yet, you know, and I hadn't seen my son in a week, and I hadn't seen my wife in a week, just kind of doing all these things. And I just laid my head back before I went inside, and I'm like, God, I miss them so much. I'm just so drained. I need time with them. And God spoke to my heart and reminded me of something very key. I missed him more. Because I was doing all this ministry and feeling lost in the shuffle, I wasn't connecting with him the way I needed to. I wasn't having that time with him like I needed. And I realized what I'm missing is him. What I'm missing is him. Because I promise you, when you get that right with him and you call out to him, he's going to do something big in your life by reconnecting you with him. And it solves a lot of what's going on in here. So call out to God in your loneliness. Secondly, deal with yourself. Deal with yourself. Oh, goodness. That's the part we don't like. In fact, that's a lot of times why we want people around us. We don't want to deal with what's going on in here. We don't want to deal with the problem here. Go to verse 17. The troubles in my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distresses. Consider my affliction and my trouble and forgive all my sins. Okay? Listen, God has a plan for our lives. Okay? We get that, right? God's got this plan. God's growing. He's developing. He's deepening. But sometimes we get outside of that plan. We run from that plan. Whether that's through willful disobedience, we call that sin, right? We go out here and we're like, yeah, I'm going to live my life. I don't need Jesus. You know, we go out here and we live our lives. That is sinful, not God's plan. Sometimes it's not so much disobedience as it is just disengagement. We don't want to participate. We don't like the pain we feel. We don't want to deal with it. We want to ignore it. We don't like the hurt and how God could use that hurt, how he intends to use that hurt. We just want to numb it. We want it gone. We just want to ignore, we want to numb, we want to get away. And in any of those situations, if God is trying, follow me on this, if God is trying to do something and pain is a part of it, then to ignore that pain is to deny something God is doing in us. That creates a disconnect within. I'm rebelling against God, who God is calling me to be, who God is making me to be, who God is offering me to be. I'm ignoring it and going this way. That is going to create a weird quasi-loneliness inside here because there's a disconnection. Does that make sense? There's a disconnection with your identity. There's a disconnection going on in here. And like I said earlier, guys, we live with a fractured inner self. And we feel nobody else understands us because we don't understand us. We can't see what's going on, and we don't want to deal with it. It leads us to the point where we're not comfortable with our own skins, much less in a crowd. And we go into the crowd, and we're smiling, and we're laughing to try to feel like we belong. But as soon as the crowd is gone, we're left alone. And we're left alone with the person we're seeing in the mirror who is fractured. And that hurts. And this is part of that calling out to God. We call out with God to deal with what's going on in here. Look at it, it says it again, and the troubles in my heart are enlarged. God, this isn't getting better. This is getting worse. God, I am more alone now than I was. Bring me out of this distress. Look at my affliction. David's affliction, you find it all through the Psalms, how good and beautiful it is for brothers to dwell in unity, how great it is to be in the house of God. God, I long for your people as the deer pants after the water. God, I want to be. Like I said, he's a king hiding in a cave, separated from his people, separated from his purpose, all through this season of his life. What do we do when we're in that season too? What do we do? Sometimes it is our sin that caused us to be there. Sometimes it's not. God's just working here. What do we do? Number one, you address your issues. Call out to God. Deal with it. God, here's my affliction. God, this is what is hurting me. Just like the doctor, man. We go to the doctor. You cannot lie to your doctor and expect to get better. You can't. You've got to deal with what's here. You've got to deal with it. Yes, it hurts. He says the distresses of my heart are enlarging. Sometimes it hurts as you're saying it. Sometimes as we speak, we're coming into deeper. That's why psychiatrists make so much money, man. They just let you lay on a couch and talk. Yeah, you work out your own stuff, man. You know? And then they just kind of, I knew you'd get there. It's like, well, why don't you pay me then, man? I just helped you and the next guy. But we have to deal with it. Deal with your issues. Deal with your hurts. Your hurts. The things that are making you not trust people. The things that are keeping you from connecting and opening. Do you know why David's crying out to God here? Because David knows that God cares. That's what Peter would say, casting all our anxieties on him because he cares for us. And we will deal with fear and anxiety next week, or 2 weeks from now. But the issue is, he's telling us to cast it on him, call out to him, because he does care about our hurts, our sins. Look at verse 18. He says, consider my afflictions and my trouble, forgive all my sins. David understands I'm not going to get anywhere until I deal with my sin before God. I can't hide it. I can't bury it. Tried that before, didn't work. God sent a prophet, called me out. We've got to deal with these things, address them, but then accept God's plan. Accept God's plan for what's going on. Trust him with your story. In this role, even as David is out here in the wilderness, in the caves, hiding away from the people, he's not taking his eyes off God. He's trusting that this is going to mold him. This is going to make him. Guys, we've got to be okay with how God is writing our story. It doesn't mean we have to enjoy every chapter, but we got to hold on to the end. And this is where we deal with these issues. Be a participant. Learn from your pain. Learn from it. Deal with it. Wrestle with it. Connect with God through it. God, my loneliness is calling me and showing me that I need connection. How do I make the connection? What's stopping me? Now, this is going to seem counterproductive, but as you're dealing with yourself, as you're addressing your issues and accepting God's plan, practice a little solitude. So that seems counterproductive. Solitude is not isolation. Solitude is simply turning off the noise so that you can refocus your life on God. That's what it is putting away the cell phone. By the way, be careful if you're using your cell phone for quiet times and stuff. I've done that, and I've had, my Bible on here, whatever. You know what happens? Notifications pop up. Things start happening, stuff like that, and it's like, ooh, distraction. And, so solitude is putting all that away. Solitude is getting you and God, dealing with you and God. And you know what starts to happen? It gives you a chance to recenter on God by asking yourself, what am I doing that's fueling my own loneliness? What am I doing that's keeping me from connecting? What's in me that I'm afraid people are going to find out? What's in me that I'm afraid I'm going to hurt someone? What's in me? And through these times, it lets us go right back to addressing our issues and accepting God's plan. I encourage you to do that. It keeps us centered. So when we feel lonely, we're going to call out to God. We're going to deal with ourselves. And lastly, we're going to reach out to others. It has to get there, right? We have to reconnect with it all. Verse 22 breaks the cycle. This whole psalm is written as an acrostic. It starts with each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, okay? So they could remember and stuff like that. Until it gets to verse 22, it just went off over here. It says, redeem Israel, O God, out of all his troubles. It's interesting that once David got his stuff worked, he reconnected with God, he called out to God, dealt with his own pain. Now suddenly he's others focused again. And he's calling out for this. Now, I want to caution you, people are not always the answer. People are not. It's not always to cure loneliness, just get around people. God, if you just give me a date. God, if you'd give me a wife. God, if you'd give me this. God, if I had more of this. That's not always the answer. In fact, if you're not connecting with God and learning to get whole and pure in here, you're not going to connect with people, right? Not on the deep basis we need to. Because God is using our relationships to heal us, define us, refine us, and empower us. We're meant to be together, which is why there are so many demonic forces at work in your life to separate all that. Because God knows what the church can do, and so does Satan. So how do we get back to this connection? How do we reach out to people in a way that says, redeem Israel, O God, out of his troubles? How do we help each other? How do we come together and resolve each other's issues? Number one, just be connected, man. Get out there. Be connected. I'm not just saying, hey, go to the park or whatever. I'm saying, you know what? Go to church. Go to churchy things. What do you mean churchy things? I mean, you know what? If we got a picnic coming up in a couple of weeks, man, over at Celebration, so we can all go, right? Both services. You get to meet new people. If you don't like the ones at this service, guess what? Yeah. We got a whole nother one. But just get out. Get around people. Serve and volunteer together. Man, when you serve alongside people, that's where you really start making some bonds, Because we're not just connecting over hobbies. We're connecting over purpose. And that carries it deeper. That's how we can have relationships with people even if we don't like to play the same board games, Or even if we don't like the same TV shows or the same genres. Well, we're on purpose together, man. Get around those people. Talk to somebody. Oh, I know that's so weird to go to church and talk to people. Talk to somebody. Just say hi. And you know what? They look at you and they say hi. Because you know what's happening in our culture today? 2% of the population, I tried to make this not TED talky by not giving you all the statistics that I've been reading for weeks. But I was lonely, so I read. 2% of the population says they have 0 close friends, which is roughly the same number of natural redheads on the planet, 2%. So whenever you see a natural redhead, think, somebody is lonely. Somebody needs me. Even if you're the one who's lonely. Let's reach out. Now, I have a natural redhead that lives in my house, so I'm constantly thinking about loneliness now. But it's the point. Let others in. Let others in. Take the time to really connect. Don't just get around yes people. Get around people who are going to love you for who you are, what you got, and challenge you to be better. Because that's the connection we're actually looking for. And be genuine. Be real with people. You know, and I don't mean that we get around people. People can't fix you. Okay, I mean, that's the, people can't fix you. That's not what they're there for. We're here to complete each other, not fix each other. And there's a difference in that. Because here's what people use social media for, okay? And we're you know I'm right, okay? We use social media to try to create an identity, to project an identity, to put it out there and create something we can live in that ain't real because we don't want to be genuinely known or seen. We do the same thing in person with people. We come to church, we put on the smile. We get around people, we laugh and we joke to hide the loneliness. We do it at work, we do it at school. We're trying to figure out who we are, so we're always kind of recreating the identity. Let me take this burden off of you. God did not put it on us to create our own identity. He gave us an identity in Jesus Christ. And He's called us to grow into that one. Get around people that are going to help you do that. Be what you're looking for, you know? Be what you're looking for. Get out there and do this. And as we feel this loneliness, call out to God in that. Let Him know the trials and the things going on. Look at yourself and deal with yourself, the hurts, the pains, the things that are keeping you from connecting, the insecurities. Get help, you know? Go talk to somebody if we're needing help to deal with those things. Get around someone who's going to do situational discipleship with you and help you to connect with Jesus, yourself, and others. And then get out there and get around people. Guys, I do want to just kind of wrap this up with this. Loneliness, it's not a sin. You know, it's not like Elijah was lonely. David was lonely. Jesus at times felt loneliness. But it's those times that we can look at the light, the warning light, and come back. Since loneliness is primarily a disconnection, that loneliness can fuel us to seek that connection again. Let it do that. Because we're all going to go through seasons. We all do. We go through seasons of life when we feel lonely. But whatever season you're in right now, I want to remind you, it is just that. It is just a season. Elijah felt alone, but Elijah was not alone. Neither are you. And when you find yourself in a season that you don't like, remember there's another season coming. Focus on that one. Look to that one. Ask God to fuel you for that one. Call out to Him. Deal with yourself. Reach out to others. And let's learn from loneliness that we can connect again. Let me pray for you. Our Father, I thank you for this opportunity you've given us to just come together and seek out your word and your plan for us because, God, we do struggle with loneliness so much. God, we live in a world that's so disconnected. We live with people we're disconnected with, and God, we don't always know how to do it. But God, these connections come a little more naturally when we learn to call out to you, when we learn how to connect with you, when we learn how to embrace you. And Father, I pray that right now you touch our lives. And God, show us where we're disconnected. If we're disconnected with you, bring us back in. If we're disconnecting on the inside, Father, heal us. And if we're not connecting with people, then God, give us the strength and the courage we need to reach out and let us find those connections. And God, let us take the responsibility for it. Because God, people need each other. And we're asking it all in Jesus' name.